Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Duncan.
Morning, Duncan.
Morning.
So, all right, I declare the meeting open. Are we waiting on any councillor?
Councillor Houstead's on, but he's not on the screen there.
I'm here, all right.
Yeah, we just can't see your photo
Right,
up there.
Yeah.
Councillor Nelson.
No, I just need to figure out.
Is councillor scanned there?
No, council. No, I'll be done back. And we just haven't got a visual yet of Councillor Houstead.
Okay, we'll just hold off until we get councillor scanned, councillor Houstead up and see where councillor scanned is.
You're watching TV.
There, councillor scanned. 2, 4, 6, 7, 8. We're ready to go. Where's?
I'm still missing out on
Yeah, we haven't got the visual of Councillor Houstead.
I had that beforehand. As soon as I logged on, I had it.
We saw you before.
You've got your camera turned off at the moment, Councillor Houstead.
Oh, okay. Bingo.
There we go. Yeah, that's it.
I'd say I bumped it when I went to the mute button.
All right, we're all present and accounted for. So I'll open the meeting with the acknowledgement of country. I wish to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we are meeting on today and pay my respects to elders both past and present, and also and that respect to any Torres Strait or Aboriginal people present today. Do we have any apologies? No apologies. Now we have the adoption of the previous minutes that have been circulated. They have gone up, of course, but would somebody like to move the acknowledgement? Councillor McLaughlin and Nelson, any discussion on the minutes? Put it, all in favour? Those against? Carried. Declaration of interest.
I had my hand up and I needed to ask a question.
Can I ask councillors that you use your cards that have been circulated on 2 occasions? Your hand up sometimes just doesn't work. Councillor Turlin?
In the information that I don't have at the moment, because I'm waiting for a copy to be sent through me, so I can't download the November minutes and the November agenda. It seems to be.
Councillor Turlin, I've just emailed you a copy, literally just then.
Okay, well, then I'll get that and read it and come back with further statements in relation to the minutes then.
It's only on the correctness of the minutes, Councillor Turlin. The minutes have been adopted by council. So this is purely a formality.
The discrepancies between this agenda and the previous one that needs to be asked questions.
I'll ask staff to make comment. Mr. Paul.
Well, as you said, Mr. Mayor, this is confirming the accuracy of the minutes. So if Councillor Turlin has got questions, it wouldn't be the appropriate place to raise them. He would need to do it through another forum.
What would that forum be?
Well, it depends. I mean, my first response would be contact the CFO or the acting Deputy General Manager, and if you've got any concerns or any issues, I'm sure that Mr. Mooney could sort that out, or contact myself. If that doesn't resolve the issue, then I guess then Councillor Turlin would have other means to deal with it, through a question with notice or notice of motion.
So, working on that, then we've put the minutes as being true and correct, and if you have any relation to business arising from that, Councillor Turlin, then question with notice or a notice with motion or a phone call. A phone call is probably the best one up. We move on to agenda reports. 6.1, page 5, Mr Mooney.
Thank you, and through you, Mr Mayor. Good morning, councillors. First report on today's agenda, 6.1, the budget review for the period ending 31st of December 2020. Councillors, the purpose of this report is to inform council of the results of the budget review undertaken for the period ending 31st of December 2020 and to seek approval to make the necessary adjustments to the 2021 budget. Councillors, after performing all identified adjustments as part of the quarterly review and before proposed reserve transfers, the projected result for the 2021 financial year is a minor deficit of $55,266. As part of this report, the recommendation from council officers is that this minor deficit be funded through the capital projects reserve. The major variations identified as part of the December quarterly review, councillors, are disclosed on page 6. As you will see on page 6, the majority of variations reported are contras, in that where there has been an adjustment for income or expenditure, there has been a correlating adjustment to offset that amount, with the exception of 2 minor items which relate primarily to the recruitment expenses for the general manager's position and other minor adjustments. As part of the December quarterly review, we also asked the senior management team to review their programs and projects with a view to identifying those which they believed would still be ongoing as of 30 June 2021. And as a result of that exercise, $1.5 million worth of proposed projects and funding allocations are being recommended to carry forward over into the 21-22 budget. The list of those projects is contained on page 7 of today's agenda. The uncommitted balance of the council contingency fund as of 31st of December is $49,041. The quarterly budget review statement, which is required by all councils to be completed and submitted within 6 weeks of the quarter end, is provided as attachment 1. Happy to answer any questions you may have, Mr Mayor or councillors.
Questions to Mr Mooney, councillors? Councillor Nelson, then Councillor Turlin, and then Councillor Scanlon.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Question to Mr Mooney, that would it be prudent that we wait until the next quarter and we'll possibly get that deficit back at 55,000?
Mr Mooney?
Through you, Mr Mayor, that would be a reasonable approach. If council elected to take a minor deficit position for the December quarter, we have for a number of years maintained a budget strategy position where we ensure that we balance our budget both in the short, medium and long term. Therefore, we have always taken the approach of presenting council with what we believe to be a recommendation which ensures a balanced budget position. But given the nature of the deficit and the minor size or the immateriality of the amount, there would be no objection with taking that approach. If I may add, Mr Mayor, obviously this is also in the context of major adjustments which were approved by council back in July of last year in relation to COVID. So all of those adjustments are taken care of. So we did a lot of the hard work, or council did a lot of the hard work last July to take care of those major variations as a result of the global pandemic and the impact that it's had on residents and local businesses. So in short, Councillor Nelson, no issue if that was the direction of council.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mr Mooney. You know, without going trying to find that sort of money, I could see straight away there's 28,000 in contingency votes that is being a rebate. So you could, you know, you could find nearly half of it straight away. So I'm more than happy to wait, wait and see what the next quarter brings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Turlin.
The first one, I know the increase in the cost of the Civic Centre. Do we have a run sheet showing us where the budget is against the actual to date, of any other variations that have taken place that we're not aware of to date?
Mr Mooney.
Through you, Mr Mayor, all variations to the budget are transparently disclosed within either the summary report or the quarterly budget review statement, which is a statutory report which council is required to present or staff are required to present to council within 8 weeks of quarter end.
So you're telling me that there is no variations to the budget and the contract of 6.9 and 9.26 million of the budget on the Civic Centre? There's no variations, no movements, no deductions?
Mr Mooney?
No, councillor,
Mr Paul?
the tender contract was for the building as tendered. There have been variations to that contract, as there always are, but the project is within the adopted budget that council has adopted, and it's not going over that budget. So it will be within that $9.2 million budget. So there's no report to come to council because there is no variation.
Well, there isn't. No, that's not true. You must think we're all silly. That there is a movement in the budget already. There is already a movement in the budget. You just mentioned it. There is variations. As councillors, we have a duty of care to understand what those movements are and what operation has been approved.
Councillor Turland, the council advised tendered a $9.5 million tender. It came in cheaper. The money that has been used for other improvements within the building. We know that.
That is not correct what you said. It is not a $9.6 million tender.
Mr.
You are
Paul,
incorrect, Mr. Mayor.
Please.
Councillor Turland, I'll be very clear about what I'm going to say. Council staff are operating within the adopted budget of 9.26, whatever the number is. I don't know the exact number, but I think it's 9.26.
That's correct.
We're obligated to report to council any variation outside of that budget. There are no variations outside of that budget.
Well, can I ask a question? What is the difference of the 2.3 million between the 6.9 million and the $9.26 million budget? What is it?
Councillor, I don't have that information in front of me. As the general manager, council adopts a budget and gives me the budget, or the acting general manager, sorry, I'll correct myself there, the acting general manager. Council entrusts the staff to manage the budget. That's what we are doing. I don't need to come back to council to get direction in terms of how I spend that budget. Council has given that budget to the acting general manager in this case and the staff to manage this project. That's what we're doing.
Well, I would like a breakup of the $2.3 million difference between the budget and the contract price. I've asked this a few times and we've been refused that information. Now, as a councillor working on behalf of the community, I require that information.
Mr. Paul?
Look, councillor, if you want to come in and check the sums on every single major project, well, that's the council's prerogative. I guess if that's where you want to go. But that's going to be very cumbersome in terms of running this business. The only variation I've just been pointed out to me by the CFO is the variation that council approved, I think on the 8th or 9th of December last year, which was $850,000 to fit out the floor over the theatrette and to fit out the Civic wing. So that's the only variation to the budget that council's approved. And I'll be sticking within that budget as well. So there'll be no budget variations coming to council for the Civic Centre.
So what is the difference to $2.3 odd million?
I don't have the answer.
Councillor Turland, if you wish any further information, will you please make an appointment with Mr. Mooney to come in to have a look at the figures that you are quite legally permitted to see, as is any other councillor, and to discuss your concerns.
Why can't it be in a report? It's a push a button. We paid $1 million odd for a project management equipment and we have nothing provided to councillors. I put a notice of motion forward and you knocked it back.
Councillor, Mr. Paul.
Oh, look, councillor, come in and I'll provide you with an update in terms of those figures. I don't have them in front of me.
Well, I mean, you must have an idea. It's obviously a contingency of a certain amount.
I'm going to stop this budget.
You don't have to stop it, Mr. Mayor. I have questions and I want them answered.
It's an inquisition. It's not questions. You've been given the answer. If you want further information, please make a time with Mr. Paul or Mr. Mooney to come in and discuss. they do not have the figures in front of them. It is work in progress.
Mr Mayor, as you know, I'm a builder and I understand this process very well.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Turlin,
Next
Really?
question.
you also describe yourself as a developer.
Yes,
Yes,
and so are you, and so is McLaughlin, and so is Nelson,
Oh,
so is
Councillor
Scandrett. So what's the tongue-in-cheek there?
Scandrett has the floor.
No, he doesn't. I have got further questions.
Excuse me, Councillor
I
Turlin.
have questions I want answered.
You will be muted. If you do not stop the imposition, your interruptions, Councillor Scandrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was actually quite happy with what Councillor Turlin was asking. That was part of my questions were going to be exactly the same. And I can't see why we can't be furnished with a report. Okay, it's not today, but overnight, please. And as you know, Mr. Mayor, I also want a copy of the Memorandum of Understanding for Station Street. But look, my particular question here is about the detail on these budgets, particularly the Civic Centre. Yes, I want confirmation that it is still within the 9.26 plus the 850 that other councillors approved
Councillor
last year.
Scandrett, you have been told it is within the budget.
The 9.26 million, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. And I do not appreciate the fact that councillors are trying to belittle staff by trying to say that they're over budget. You have been told it is within
Mr. Mayor, I object to that inference. I'm just asking a question as an elected councillor, and it is incumbent upon me hang on, can I speak? When people come to me and say, how's the Civic Centre going? I say, right, yes, good point. I'll be dealing with that at the finance meeting. But were you to dump Station Street, you'd actually have no problem with the budget for the Civic Centre, nor Lackey Park.
Okay, now what is your question?
I've put it there. Could we have that report in the next 24 hours on
you can't
the
have
budget? Thank you.
24 hours.
For the Civic Centre. Thank you.
The answer is no. The answer is I will ask Mr. Paul in relation to any increased expenditure to be promoted to councillors. Now, any other question in relation to the this item? No other questions. Councillor Turl.
The land rental increase in income, can you explain how we've got an income increase when it should be the same every year under the leases or whatever the documents you've signed with different parties?
What page, Councillor Turl?
Page 6.
What you're referring to is the transfer that's been made from the water and sewer fund to the general fund for at least 20 years now, which is a contribution back to the general fund for the fact that we have water and sewer mains under our public roads and streets. A percentage of the revenue generated in water and sewer. So it's an internal charge and an internal movement, and it depends on the revenue that's raised in the water and the sewer funds.
Now, I can give you a bit more. This was introduced in about 1998, and it was put forward by the then Democrat councillor Greg Butler, thank you, and was gained the support of council that we charge across our infrastructure a rate, and that way we could use that money for other programs. So I can remember the debate pretty well, actually, and I know it's 18 years ago, but I can remember it. It might be 20.
Anyway, the issue is this. If you look down the line on page 6, land rental reserves increase in income 155. Contributions from water and sewer increased 75. Are they the same item? That's what you've just explained to me.
Mr Mooney.
Through you, Mr Mayor, no, they're not the same items. Councillor, the requested transfer from the land rental reserve, or the recommended transfer from the land rental reserve, aligns with the request for additional funding for the Lackey Park Regional Sporting Hub design. Councillors would be aware, as part of the 1920 budget, funding was approved to allow the concept design and for the endorsement of that concept design to be progressed. We're now at a stage where that master plan has been endorsed by council, and to progress that project to shovel readiness, we now need to undertake the required development studies, whether they be drainage, parking, environmental studies that are required for that particular site. So we are requesting that $155,000 be allocated to bring that project to shovel readiness, and that the funding source for that additional work be the land rental reserve.
So the water organisation reserve of 350,000, is that the same as the 75 contributions to the water and sewer fund increase? Are they the same?
No, through you, Mr Mayor, I'm happy to line all of those up for you. The water augmentation reserve, that's an increase of 350,000. That is offset against the water main renewal program, where there are 6 large water main renewal projects that we are undertaking as part of the 2021 capital works program. And as part of undertaking the REFs, the request for environmental factors for each of those projects, we've identified additional costs that have to be incurred in relation to those particular projects. So the line item there, which states water main renewal program, increase of $350,000, is the offset against the water augmentation reserve. The $75,000, councillor, that is there for the contribution from water and sewer funds, that aligns with the item above, which is the business transformation reserve of $175,000, and is used to offset the increase in the microwave network upgrade. Now, councillors, you would be well aware that over the past 12 months, the organisation has seen a significant uplift in our mobility, which has been led by the CIO. And a big part of that has been having the correct technology on board to allow bandwidth for data to not only transmit across our key major sites, but also to increase our bandwidth to allow people, our staff, to work remotely at a reasonable pace. So that's a good investment there of $250,000 that we are recommending as part of this quarterly review, which will again go towards future-proofing the technology and the digital aspects of our business. Water and sewer obviously are a big part of our business, and are therefore naturally making a contribution of $75,000 towards that upgrade. So I do hope that goes some way to answering your questions, councillor. Again, either before meetings or even after meetings, if there is any further detail that I or my staff can provide, or alternatively through the acting general manager, we're more than happy to meet or speak with you on the phone to work through these proposed adjustments.
You just mentioned REFs are part of the process of the water augmentation reserves, and the water mains you're about to increase. Can I have a copy of those, please?
Mr Mooney.
I'd have to refer that to the acting general manager. They are RES that we are undertaking through you, Mr Mayor. They are RES that we are undertaking on water main renewal projects. We would complete dozens, if not hundreds of those a year. So, Mr Acting General Manager.
Look, at the end of the day, if Councillor Turlin thinks that will add some value, I'll circulate them to all councillors.
Okay, so the answer is yes. Councillor Scandrett, then Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a further question. I'm happy with the report. A further question on the Civic Centre. Are there any anticipated or otherwise changes in expenditure for being discussed or foreseen for the balance of the project construction, which I think we were going to have handover in lockup was possibly in March originally.
I'll put that question to the Acting General Manager, Mr Paul.
Councillor Scandrett, I've already answered this question, but At this point in time, there are no variations to that budget. Will there be any variations that I need to report to council? At this point in time, I'm not aware of any. If there are any, I'll let you know.
So I'll give you an ironclad guarantee, Councillor Scandred, if there is any variation over the amount of money that was allocated to the project, it will be disseminated to councillors, okay? So if there is any variation over the budget, councillors will be advised.
Thank
Councillor Halstead?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just finish up, if I may, to say that obviously there's a whole lot of other things that might need to be done in there. I think I'm interested in those, as is Councillor Turland, whether they're coming from other budgets or whatever. I'm ready to move the motion when the recommendation.
Thank you. There is no variation at this point in time, and if there is, councillors will be advised. Councillor Halstead.
Yeah, pretty straightforward one. There was a mention, in fact, there's two questions now as a result of a comment you just made, or the acting general manager made. Councillor Turland made reference to the REFs. I just put in the form of a question. You are aware, aren't you, Mr. Mayor, that they are public documents, and it is good that the acting general manager has given that undertaking to make them available. So that's the first question. The second one is a more important one. The Mayor again, and confirmed by comments made by the acting general manager and Mr. Mooney, is that the work on the Civic Centre is not going to exceed the budget. And the acting general manager was very firm on that one. In fact, I think more firm than I've ever heard him in the past. But could a statement be made in the form of a press release? And continually we see them coming out, which are pretty good. Could a press release be done on that basis, that to just allay the fears of the community that the work that's being undertaken there will, as the acting general manager said, will be an ironclad guarantee that will be within budget?
I'll support that, Councillor Halstead, and we will do a press release on the project at this point of time, where it's up to, and fair enough comment, so the community are aware.
Moving the recommendation, Mr. Mayor, with that addition.
Mr. Scandred.
Floor, Councillor Scandred.
My God.
So yes.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, now Councillor Scandred has moved the recommendation, and Mr. Paul will make a comment.
Look, councillors, I'm a little bit bemused by what transpired this morning, but I'll make it very clear. Any variation or any material variation to the budget, the general manager doesn't have the power to alter the budget, or the acting general manager. Only council can alter the budget. So I'm obligated to report that to council and have that ratified by council. And that's what we do through quarterly budget reviews. And if there are any significant budget variations that come to fruition or come to my visibility prior to those quarterly reviews, then I'll bring a report to council. So I'm somewhat bemused by what's going on this morning. Councillors, you are aware of that the general manager or the acting general manager can't alter the budget. Only council can.
Are you seconding the motion, Councillor Turland?
No, I've got a question in relation to page 16 and page 17.
I'm looking for a seconder to Councillor Scandred's motion, seconded by Councillor Whipper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the point 4 is to just say that the acting general manager is to issue a media release confirming the Civic Centre project is on budget.
It'll be a one-liner.
Yes, okay. Well, I said we will do one on a positive spin to let the community know that their $9.5 million is being spent.
9.26, Mr. Mayor.
9 point whatever.
You can put that in there on budget at 9.26. Thank you.
I need to check the figure, councillor.
Councillor Turland.
Yeah, on page 17, buildings. Increase is due to the additional budget of the Civic Centre, $850,000, installation of solar of $87,000, and the refurbishment of the library of 52. Now, all I was asking for, are all these things and extras coming in, or have you allowed for them, or is that out of the contingency? Already on page 17, there is variations that have been noted, and that's what I'm asking for. Why would you note a variation of the library of 52 and 87 for solar if it is or it isn't in the budget already?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the solar installation is being funded, my understanding is from the REF fund, which is a common practice that this council has adopted for the past several years. That will ensure any savings as a result of installing that solar is paid back into the REF fund. Therefore, it was not included in the original budget. The Mosfet library refurbishment, again, that is part of the discrete project, which is getting the library up to a point, fittings, furniture, all the bits that go along with making that library space both modern, convenient and accessible for our residents, getting that library ready for opening. It is not part of the $9.26 million budget.
Well, that's what I was asking for from day one. Now, the next question I've got, on all the rest of the pages on attachment where there's a over the budget or under the budget, usually there's a statement from staff of why. In some cases, there actually is notes of why things are over and under. A lot of the pages are vacant of any information of why the changes of staff comments.
We are dealing with.
This is attachment 1, Mr. Mayor. It's still attachment 1.
So what's
This is attachment 1.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, what's the question, please?
Well, where we have, doesn't matter, from attachment on, any of the pages, 27, 26, all of them are supposed to have notes from the staff of why there's an increase or a change to the original budget. There is hardly anything on most of these pages of staff comments of why the changes are there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, there are comments in every section where there is a change. Where there are no comments, there are no changes.
But an increase in budget is a change, is it not?
Councillor Turland, I am going to shut this part of the debate down because it is just repetition. You either vote for the recommendation as moved by Councillor Scandrett and seconded by Councillor Whipper, or you vote against it. So I put the recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation, please raise your card. Those against, Councillor Turland, you voting against it, Councillor Nelson?
Yes, against.
Yes, okay. Now we move to page 45, 6.2, quarterly progress report operational plan. Mr. Moon.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, may refer this to Ms. Ligard to
Ms.
present this
Ligard.
report.
Through the chair, good morning, councillors. The purpose of this report is to provide the Finance Committee with an overview of Council's progress towards delivering its operational plan for 2020/2021. The operational plan contains 204 projects, programs and activities that Council has committed to deliver over the course of the financial year. The quarterly progress report for the period 1st of October 2020 to 31st of December 2020 is an exception report. And you'll see in that report at the end of December, 98% of all annual deliverables were on track, 1.5% were on hold, and 0.5% were delayed. Attachment 1 to this report, in the first part of that attachment, you'll see highlights for the quarter under the themes of leadership, people, places, environment and economy. And you'll also see the highlights from Council's bushfire recovery responses. The second part of attachment 1 provides Council with an overview of activities that are on hold or delayed. Attachment 2 to this report provides progress on all Council's major capital projects over the value of $5 million. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions of Ms. Ligard, Councillor Turland and Councillor Scandrett, and then Councillor Nelson?
On page 56 and 57, it mentions Wattle Street and Kirkham Road, Mossvale Bypass, But at this stage, I can't see a detailed statement about the Station Street project. Can you find that statement of the Station Street project?
Ms. Lidgard?
Well, it's not in there because
It's
it
not in
hasn't
there.
been,
It hasn't been,
finalised.
yeah, it's not finalised and it hasn't been identified as a highlight for this period.
Say that again, sorry.
It's not, it hasn't been identified as a highlight for this period, but you will see an update in attachment 2 or some commentary on attachment 2 around Station Street.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but there's a $500,000 extra spend from the November budget to where we are today in February, and there's not a statement in here about it? Nothing? Not a word?
Ms. Lidgard?
There is a statement on page 63 around Station Street. It's identified as one of the exceptions. I can't comment any further on that because I'm not responsible for that project.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and I appreciate what you're saying, Ms. Lidgard, but it would seem that there's an increase, it's clear, between the attachment 2 when we get to it and where we are in this report, which should have had some statement of why the increase of $500,000 has been expended since the November budget.
Mr. Mooney?
Well, again, councillor, with the greatest respect, the operational plan doesn't have a comment on every single dollar that we've spent. There is some commentary in the report about Station Street. On page 64, you get a separate detailed, I suppose, response on projects over $5 million. There is some commentary there on Station Street. The reality is that in terms of the progress of Station Street, up until the 31st of December, it was pretty much the status quo.
I understand that, but what we've gone in November, and it was $2.2 million, I think we expended. We are now $2.7 million we've expended in one quarter.
Yes, well, we've probably paid some bills to finalise the detailed design work.
Well, then it should have been a statement in relation to.
I disagree, councillor.
That's not the purpose of the
It's
operation.
not the purpose of the operational plan, to comment on minutiae in the operational delivery program.
This is the highlights
It's a
against
high-level
the
report.
objective, yeah.
A high-level report means we should have the information that should be in there. You
Councillor,
can't pick and choose. This is the biggest project we're supposed to be undertaking, and we get little bits of information fed to us like we're lambs.
Mute everybody, please. Right, everybody is muted. I will not have people over talking each other. I mean, if you're watching this, you'd think, no wonder there is the council is classified as an improvement order. Can I ask, when one is speaking, the other is allowed to continue until, even if it offends you, allow the person to complete their presentation. Councillor Turlin, you have the floor. Then then the acting general manager.
I've asked the question, and it seems to be answered that we're not going to be told the $500,000 cost increase, and it's not in any of the sheets in the attachment 1 explaining why those costs have gone up. Very little statements about the biggest project that this council is supposedly going to try and undertake. Anyway, you've answered the question. We're not going to get the information. It's going to be kept within house. That's fine. I'll leave it at that.
I think that deserves a response from the general manager. Then I'll put this section to bed, and any other further question to Ms. Lidgard, and I think I saw Councillor Scandrett and then Councillor Nelson. Last comment on this piece, Mr. Paul.
Mr. Mayor, I need to put it straight. Councillor Turlin has used the word cost increase. That is factually incorrect. What is reported is the expenditure against budget. It is not a cost increase. That is misleading. So, in terms of that project, there's been expenditure in that quarter of $500,000 against an approved budget. And again, don't quote me, I don't have the exact figure, but I think it's something like $18.2 million. So there's been expenditure against budget, as there has been in 10,000 other line items where we have a budget. So that statement is misleading in my view. And councillor, no, we don't provide a detailed response on every single project or every single item where we incur expenditure. You get commentary where there is variation to budget, or where there are concerns with budget, or where we have any issues that we believe that council needs to be aware of. When we are delivering works, projects, services, whatever it is, within the budget, and there are no significant variations that we need to report to the council, we generally don't comment on. Now, in terms of the Station Street project, it is one of the projects that is over $5 million. It is specifically reported on in that report that you've got on page 64, as are other significant projects over $5 million. So I'm a little bemused as to what this castigation of the staff and the allegations are about this morning.
Thank you. That section is put to bed. Councillor Scandrett, then Councillor Nelson, then Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad you referred to the performance improvement orders, of which there were 10 items about in-meeting procedure, and I hope that you'll release those shortly, because I think
Councillor Scandrett.
my question, one of those was not to interrupt.
Councillor Scandrett, you will stick to the item on the agenda.
I would have finished by now.
Where Councillor Scandrett, improvement order is not part of the agenda.
So my question is to Ms. Lidgard, I guess, who I wrote to on Monday, and staff, asking for a copy of the MOU, which is referred to on page 63 and 64 in the operational plan report. I still haven't got a copy of that MOU. Could we discuss as to why I haven't got that here now?
I'll answer that. Councillor Scandrett, you don't ask group managers for information. You refer those requests to the acting general manager. Unfortunately, I was ill yesterday. Excuse me for being ill, but sometimes I do actually get ill. So I will deal with that matter today.
My question, Mr. Paul, went to the divisional people who then referred it to Ms. Lidgard. I didn't write to Ms. Lidgard originally. Anyway, I'm just trying to be a councillor, and I just want to see a copy of the MOU. Will I have that today?
Councillor Scandrett, I have told you I will deal with that matter today.
I'm asking if you will provide it today.
We'll deal with that matter today.
Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I've got a couple of additional items that I wanted to add to the recommendation. So when the questions are finished, because I see this as a pretty good report, Mr. Mayor, so I'll have a couple of extra items to add to the recommendation.
You can move the recommendation if you wish, Councillor Nelson, with your additions at this point of time. And while you're formulating that, I'll go to Councillor McLaughlin.
I've taken the opportunity to send them through, so I'm happy to move it, and I'll speak to it if I get a seconder.
Okay, can we put it up, please? Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and congratulations to staff actually to have a on-track record of 98%. I think is really outstanding. On hold is very minor. My question would go to page 63, if I could, with regard to our developing our waste strategy. Can staff inform us where we're at with that? I'm still very interested, as the acting general manager would know, about whether we move forward with a FOGO at some stage. I know it's in the wings, but maybe we could be updated. Thank you.
Okay, who wants to take that? Mr. Paul?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Good question, Councillor McLaughlin. In relation to Council's waste strategy going forward, we are, I guess, awaiting the state government to put out a policy position at a state level. Now, that's been delayed and delayed and delayed. It's important that we wait for that document because it will give some direction and guidance about what sorts of alternative waste streams and waste to energy and those sorts of things that the state government is going to facilitate and allow to happen in this state. And there's been some significant flip-flops, I would say, in terms of the state government's position in regard to waste. And the biggest one of those is mixed waste organics, which is now currently going to landfill, whereas it used to be used in agriculture and for rehabilitation of mines. The state government has now banned that as a recycled product. There are some concerns around the material that potentially comes from FOGO as well. So we're taking a cautious approach in terms of that. FOGO will be built into Project 24, which is the shared services contract that we are looking to enter into with Wallandilly, Camden and Campbelltown councils. FOGO will be part of that. It's part of that future contract. So at this point in time, I suppose, in terms of FOGO for Wingecarriby, it's not on the agenda in the short term, but it's certainly on the agenda for the medium term.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paul. I appreciate that report that you've given. Thank you.
Thank you. Last question, Councillor Turlin.
Page 64. I note in 2018 and 19, we increased the budget by $1.258 million. And in 2021, we increased it by $929,000 on Station Street. We are now heading to 21-22. Is there an increase in the budget for Station Street? And why is all the notations different than the November statements made under the next step, current project, milestones, and officers' comments?
Well, Mr. Paul, I'll answer the first one, and then I'll hand over to Mr. Paul. There is no variation to the budget without council approval. Mr. Paul.
Well, I'm not sure what Councillor Turlin is referring to. Mr. Mooney, have you got a comment?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Paul, happy to answer that. The two escalations that you referred to there, Councillor Turlin, were cost escalation increases that were approved by council. So as part of each of the annual budget processes that were presented for those respective financial years, council was advised of delays in the project. Obviously, there's been a great deal of there's been a great deal of concern with projects of this size, that where there have been delays in delivery, that we haven't necessarily in the past allowed for cost escalation, given the fact that a delay in a project of 3 or 4 years, naturally means that there will be an increase, or more than likely an increase when you go to competitive tender. So those two increases that you referred to, Councillor Turlin, were for cost escalations due to the delays in the project. The third part of your question, which related to the 21-22 budget, we're in the process of coordinating responses back from the senior management team. The 21-22 budget will be presented to the executive within the next 3 to 4 weeks, with a view to bringing that back to council in late April, early to late April, depending on the timing of when we can get council in a room. Any variations to the 21-22 budget will be presented to that initial briefing with council. The fourth part of the question, councillor, I'm going to have to confess that the change to the Station Street upgrade is as a result of me personally being the author of that comment. That happens from time to time. You have different individuals provide the comments to those reports. I provided, albeit subjectively, what I felt to be the most pertinent points regarding that project, and that is that we have recently been able to obtain a copy of the Memorandum of Understanding through Tahi. Now, I felt and was of the belief that that was the most important matter to raise with respect to that project. Again, I'll say it, that's a subjective take that I've provided. If that's not hit the mark, then I do apologise, and I do believe that there's a question with notice that's been responded to for next week, which will go into some of that detail. It's as simple as that.
That's good, but there's the standard guidelines under public works is an 8.5% increase per year on projects. Am I correct?
I don't
No,
think
I
that's-
don't. No.
No, it is correct. That's where you're wrong, because I know I'm correct. Anyway, I will challenge that decision, Mr Mayor. It is correct. Increase per year is 8.5 on
Councillor Turland, you said council staff have said no. You've said you're right, they're wrong. I would like a clarification for my own benefit and other councillors. Mr Mooney.
I don't think it's a comment that Mr. Mooney or I can make. We're not in the project management world. I would need to get some advice.
Okay.
Well, I'd like that noted, please, so we can have that answered. The cost increase of escalation per year as per the public works guidelines. I think, Mr Paul, you mentioned it to us in one of the other statements, or it's in writing somewhere, 8.5. I've made notes on my documents per year.
That will be clarified. Councillor Nelson, would you like to speak to your motion, please?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I've put in, I thought this was a pretty good report, so I've added in that it should be shared with all and sundry.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor. Happy to second it, Mr Nelson, councillor.
Thanks. Look, it's a very good report, particularly with the bushfire recovery efforts that are outlined. And if I can indulge, Mr Mayor, I'd just like to highlight a lot of the items that are in there, namely the COVID-19 support to the community, the Southern Highlands Arts Trail. We had sales figures of 317,000 for local studios. The All Abilities Berrima Playground, 80,000 to support additional netball courts. Blackie Park Regional Sporting Hub Master Plan, 2.8 million from the federal government to renovate the Bowral Memorial Hall. The Memorial Hall redevelopment will comprise structural upgrades to the existing building, including the installation of a new roof and lifts, upgrading the kitchen and bathroom facilities, and providing access for all abilities. Other improvements will include the installation of a new air and conditioning system, sound and lighting equipment, upgrade seating, and improved building acoustics. Heritage elements of the building will be protected. So that's all good for the Bowral Memorial Hall. The Civic Centre construction continues, and I'm looking forward to seeing and using the new Mosfet Library. The 542,000 from the federal government to repair and refurbish the Mittagong SES Volunteer Centre. Wattle Street Car Park in Bowral creating 98 vehicles, and in addition to including 41 additional car spaces, it also received new lighting, asphalt surfacing and landscaping. The Wombian Caves upgrade, another highlight. The 2.4 million to begin preliminary investigations, including design for Mosfet bypass project, which follows on from the 20 million election commitment for this project. So council's now going to undertake preliminary planning and design, road safety audit, public consultation and engagement on the viability of the project. And that's before the work starts. Sorry, just indulge me a little more. The amenities building at Church Road playing fields in Mosfet. The Climate Change Advisory Panel established and met on the 14th of December 2020. The Koala Conservative Project. The Destination Strategy 2020 to 2030. Amendments to Council's LEP that provides greater flexibility for the Shire's tourism and hospitality industry was finalised, unanimously supported by Council and adopted by the New South Wales Government. And the Regional Livestock Exchange upgrade continues. I just say congratulations, Council, congratulations, staff, and thanks go to the state and federal members for grant funding provided for these works to be undertaken. I look forward to sending this report to the state and federal members for their information. So well done, staff, and thanks for the indulgence.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson, and you obviously put a lot of work into that. And yes, it's nice when council gets recognised for the all the good things they do, and but no, we always seem to go down and get into the gutter and so well done on that presentation, Councillor Nelson. I'll put the recommendation.
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor McLaughlin, oh sorry, Councillor Whipper, then Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank Councillor Nelson for highlighting the positives in the report. I think there is a great deal that council have been doing in community and something and to be proud of. It's unfortunate that we have this propensity to look for negatives in everything when the real story, I think, lies in the negatives. In the positives, particularly when you look at this report, and I wouldn't have read it out in detail like Councillor Nelson, but I do thank you for doing that because there is so much there. And, you know, the interesting thing, Mr. Mayor, is that a lot of these things happen silently. Council is making some very good relationships and partnerships in community. The social work that's happening in this community and the partnerships that are being expanded through those partnerships and serving the community, I think are astronomical. We've got council representatives on the Community Advisory Committee of the PHN. Bushfire Recovery is doing amazing work out there with people suffering stress and anxiety and mental health issues, poverty, homelessness, COVID, we're assisting on that front as well. These are really trying times, Mr. Mayor, and I can understand that people feel disillusioned and negative, but I think it's about time we started to focus on the positives. And this is a positive report. I'm happy to support it, Councillor Nelson, because I think these good news stories are what people need to hear, not the bad news and not all the muckraking and the electioneering that's going on in an election year coming up. We need to sell the story that we're not dysfunctional. There are things that are happening silently. People making a noise don't always reflect the true work that's being done. So happy to support the recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper, for those positive remarks. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Whipper, for mentioning those people that want to highlight the negatives for their own personal reasons, whether it's electioneering or not. Just in passing, Mr. Mayor, if I could highlight, I was at a Labor Party branch meeting on Monday night. Quite a few people came up to me to say how impressed they were with the work that council undertook with Merrigang Street, in particular. Rodney Cavalier said what a fantastic job. Other people said the people that were working there on the road were so accommodating with driveways and people coming and going, and just it's a project that took a long time to finally get through, but they're very pleased with the outcome, and it's a fantastic job. So I'd just like to note that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, and I'll make the comment. I was speaking to a councillor yesterday and said, look, if you want to see a great project, drive around Glebe Park, and the work that the staff have done over there with the continuation and the formalisation of all the car parking and the footpaths. It is a jewel in the crown for Barrel is Glebe Park now. And, they're the things that we should be promoting and being proud of, not this gutter raking against staff and trying to pick the faults in whatever we can to promote ourselves as white knights on a charger. So, well done to the staff, and I agree with you, Councillor Nelson, a great report, and thank you, Ms. Lingard, for presenting it. Any other comments? And I do note, I think, is Councillor Turlin still in the room?
Well,
Yep.
We have no visual of him. I'll put the recommendation. All in favour, please raise your card. He's back. All those against? Councillor Turlin. I declare the motion carried. We move to 6.3, loan borrowings in relation to the Commonwealth Bank in 6.3 million. You moving it, Councillor Nelson?
Yes,
Seconded
move that.
Lachlan. Is there any discussion?
Just a question.
Yes, Councillor
A
Lachlan.
question to Mr. Mooney, or through the acting general manager. Council could go for additional general fund loans, but could you tell me the reason why that we can't exceed that 6.310 million figure, please?
Mr. Mooney.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, councillors, as articulated within the report, the $6.3 million has been included in our long-term financial plan. That's our 10-year forecast of expenditure and revenue that we prepare on an annual basis to ensure that our sustainability indicators, our key financial performance indicators, are all trending either in a positive trend and certainly ensuring that they comply with the benchmarks set by the New South Wales State Government. Councillors, whilst we have the capacity to borrow the $6.3 million, our ability to service any further debt beyond that isn't within the means of our long-term financial plan. So in layman's terms, what that means is that the amount of revenue we receive every year will permit us to be able to repay the loans of $6.3 million, but any further than that, any higher than that, and we do not have the revenue identified within our long-term financial plan to offset any additional increase in loan repayments. I trust that explains why the report of $6.3 million is before you today, Council.
Councillor Nelson, you happy with that?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lachlan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mooney, I appreciate that answer. I suppose there is a tendency when and an opportunity when we see, interest rates at almost giveaway prices at zero. There is and I know a couple of councils have said before, now is the opportunity to get out there and grab some of this very cheap money. But I like that you're holding back, because we do have to make repayments on that, and that's important. But the question I sort of put with regard to long-term payments and spacing this over the community for 20 years is that we are seeing an increase in our just our DAs and the people moving in. I think we had an increase of like 30%. Is that something that's included in our forward projections with regard to the increase in rates and income that would come in from a bigger pie, if you like, so that the opportunity may be there in the future for additional borrowings?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I may answer that in two parts. Councillor Laws. Councillors, this $6.3 million is only part of a four-year forward estimate program of borrowings, which is in excess of $40 million. So this is only the borrowings that we will require this financial year. So our delivery program and our operational plan does identify in excess of $40 million that we intend on borrowing for a variety of projects, notwithstanding the most significant being the upgrade of our sewer treatment plant. So yes. Absolutely agree with your statement, Councillor, and all senior staff do, and that where borrowings is seen as an attractive means of funding capital infrastructure, is certainly an area that we investigate and look to utilise. Goes without saying. So that answers the first part of your question. The second part of your question, our long-term financial plan is reviewed on an annual basis. So my comment to you at this point would be that I would believe that the estimates that we've set around development income would be reasonable. However, we review that on an annual basis, and if there is an opportunity as part of reviewing over the annual budget, the 4-year forward estimates or the 10-year long-term financial plan, to look to increase our level of borrowings, that's something that we would bring back to council as part of the budget process. Certainly not something that we would discount. It's certainly something that forms part of the broader budget conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Mooney. Well done. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Thank you, Councillor McLaughlin. Thank you, Mr. Mooney. Mr. Paul will make a comment and then a question from Councillor Turley.
Look, just a quick comment to sort of perhaps close off on the second part of the question that Councillor McLaughlin asked. Yes, when we get growth, we get additional rate revenue. But the flip side is we have to service more residents. We have to service more roads, more drainage, more footpaths, more parks and gardens. So it's not a free kick in terms of our revenue because we have offsetting expenditures. So it's a balancing act.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
T Corp, we've only borrowed money off the big four banks or one four bank. What would be the reasons why we didn't take up any borrowings from T Corp?
Mr. Mooney.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. As articulated in the report and on page, top of page 68, the New South Wales State Government via the Office of Local Government in May of last year introduced a raft of economic stimulus packages, one which was focused on loosening, is probably the correct word, loosening the access to New South Wales councils to T Corp finance. That's not something that as a individual council we've ever had problems with. We, as you are aware, council, were determined to be fit for the future under the prior state government's reform agenda. That gave us, amongst other criteria, immediate access to T Corp finance. Unfortunately, one of the decisions that was handed down at the same time was that there was a 2-year moratorium on councils utilising T Corp finance for upgrades or refurbishments to their administration offices. Now, this is only my personal view, but given the fact that council had essentially signed off on the tender for the Civic Centre refurbishment in the prior December, we had also submitted to the Office of Local Government our capital expenditure review for the Civic Centre refurbishment project, which we had no negative feedback or comments from the Office of Local Government with respect to that document. One would think that, you know, we certainly, as a council, we're not rushing off to utilise T Corp to fund an admin project that hadn't been in the pipeline for some time. That being said, that's the situation we're in. Given the size of the loan being $6.3 million and the 50% of it being related to the Civic Centre refurbishment, we took a position that we would seek rates from commercial lenders as opposed to T Corp finance in this instance. That is not to say that in the future, depending on our position over the next 4 years, that we would certainly make sure that we adhere to the loan borrowing policy, and that is obtain quotes from T Corp as well as from competitive lenders, commercial lenders, which is something that's quite clear within our loan borrowing policy.
Councillor Turley.
You know, I understand that, but when you says here denies council loan funding for T Corp, from T Corp for the Civic Centre, so we could have borrowed the money for the cemetery, land acquisition, and Kirkham Road and anything else we wish through T Corp. Is the rate of T Corp cheaper than the Commonwealth Bank?
Councillor, through you, Mr. Mayor, it is my professional opinion that bundling up the 4 loans to a $6.3 million amount and seeking the rates through commercial lenders was a much more cost-efficient method, and that any additional savings that may have been offered through T Corp would have been too marginal, would have not been of any significant benefit. What we put in front of you is what we believe professionally is the best option for council in terms of taking up these loans.
No, I understand that, but may I have the cost of what the interest rate for T Corp would be, please?
Don't have that with me at this point in time.
No, whenever, that's fine, whenever. Yep.
Okay, look, you've got to give a bit of faith in council staff that they are acting on the best interest of the ratepayer of the Shire. And I have no reason to doubt what has been put in the report is the best outcome for the community. So do you wish to speak to your recommendation, Mr. Councillor Nelson?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor. Happy to have it put and move on. Thank you.
Okay, then I put the recommendation. All in favour, please wave your card. Everybody's in favour. Yes, I can see everybody going for it. Thank you. Now this one, 6.4, this came about because of a certain decision by a resident. Mr Mooney.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'll briefly introduce this report. The report presents a draft policy position for Council's consideration. It relates to the procedures and the policy that Council takes in relation to permanent road closures and road leases. Councillors, as you would all be more than aware, the Roads Act is ultimately the piece of legislation which guides councils with respect to permanent road closures and road leases. What we have done and what we have presented to you today essentially closely aligns to the Roads Act. We believe we've been able to put it into a process that residents will be able to easily understand. And importantly, what we've also done is we've made it very clear that moving forward, that the valuation method that council will adopt as a standing position for road closures is the valuation at a square metre rate of the adjoining land. As you would be aware, councillors, we've had some issues around that over the past couple of years and with objections coming through to council. So this really does put a very clear platform so that residents, before they even approach council staff with respect to road closures, have an upfront knowledge of potentially what the cost will be. It's largely an administrative policy, so we're not recommending that community engagement is required. So we're seeking council's formal adoption of the policy position today.
Yeah, happy to move.
Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Halstead, Councillor Whipper and Councillor Scared. Councillor McLaughlin. I'm looking over initially and then would.
Yeah, I think Councillor Nelson had his hand up to move it, but I'm happy to second it or whatever. But I was just going to ask a question. With our new and improved website facility, is this something that can be accessed by the community rather than tying up councillor planners' time, so that they can easily find this and read it and understand it themselves on our new website, our new friendly, easily accessed website?
Yes, it is. Will be much more.
Thank you. Thank you. That's good.
Councillor Halstead.
Yes, Mr Mayor, it's a question, and a statement was made by Mr Mooney. It said, he said this policy closely aligns with the Roads Act. That was his comment. My question is, total compliance is required. Has that occurred in this process? In other words, within this policy?
Mr Mooney.
Through you, Mr Mayor, simple answer, yes, councillor. Yes, councillor, total compliance. Where the comment relates to closely aligns, there are obviously certain aspects around valuation methodology that the Roads Act is silent on. That is what we've included within the policy. But in terms of the Roads Act, total compliance has been reflected within this policy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Halstead. Councillor Whipper, then Councillor Scared, then Councillor Turl.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. If I could ask through you, Mr Mayor, to Mr Mooney, on page 77 under road leases, the first dot point, it does say that the lease will only be considered if in agreement between all affected adjoining landowners, neighbours, is given before a lease is considered. Now, what in the event that two people apply for the lease, or there's one recalcitrant who who wants to disrupt the whole process? I mean, is there any discretion in relation to that?
Mr Mooney.
Through you, Mr Mayor, you've described some situations that have occurred recently.
Yeah.
Recalcitrant is probably a word that we haven't chosen to use, a little bit firmer than that, but councillor, it is to avoid a situation where council becomes what's the right word? Meat in the sandwich, because unfortunately that does happen, where we've had situations where unformed roads have been situated at the rear of several properties, and we've had situations where we've had all people come to council and or all property owners come to council and informally give their concurrence to a road lease, only then to find 3 or 4 months later 2 or 3 of the residents have had an argument and decided to pull out. So it really is a difficult one. We're not there to act as an arbitrator. We're not there to act as a negotiator. And to be quite frank, councillor, it does then end up absorbing more time of council staff, which should be on other matters, not necessarily dealing between or trying to negotiate between neighbourhood disputes. That's the reason we've included that in there. That's not to say, like any policy position, councillor, if there was a case where council was of the view that an individual was acting in such a detrimental fashion to allow a road lease to go through, that's something that we potentially would bring to council.
Right. So that possibility is still there for council to determine in that event. I know with Mr. Mooney, with the like community land, there is a process where an independent arbitrator, generally the minister, can look at any of those if there is an objection. I'm just thinking that some people are bloody minded and irrational at times, and that could frustrate. But if there is the opportunity for full council to look at those factors if they arise, then I'm happy with it. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Whipper. Councillor Scandrett.
Questions for Mr. Mooney. First of all, Mr. Mooney, I can't find in here any comment on communicating to the general community. I see that you will write to affected landowners, but why wouldn't we have a signage comment in here so that people driving down these roads would be made aware of such proposal?
Mr. Mooney.
Council, that's part of our public advertising process that we would go through for any proposed road closure. Signage in appropriate places is something that we would undertake.
Well, I'd like you to put something like that in the draft policy. Secondly,
Wait a minute, Councillor Scandrett, you've asked that question. I think staff wish to comment on that. Mr.
Well, look, just a question, I suppose. Policy is policy. It's high level, it's strategic in its intent. It's not the how-to necessarily. So I hear what you're saying, Councillor Scandrett, in terms of making sure that the broader community has some knowledge of it. We'll certainly take that on board and we'll make it happen.
That's something that we've got under the Roads Act as well. So
great. You'll put it in the draft, I hope. Second question is, with other considerations on page 75, it says application will not be closed, supported with subdivision potential. What happens if a road closure is approved and the applicant doesn't take it up within the specified time? Does it lie on the table or does it have a bookend date to it?
Thank you, Councillor Scandrett. Mr. Mooney.
Certainly does, through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly does. Councillor, we don't typically keep these matters open. Where there are instances such as that, it is typically where council has, via formal resolution, agreed on a valuation price, which obviously this report largely addresses, and that's not to the satisfaction of the adjoining property owner. Where that happens, we typically write to the applicant. We provide them with a period of time, typically anywhere between 30 to 60 days to formally respond to council. Where no response is received, we again typically then close the file.
My last question on that same page, Mr. Mooney, point 3. Applications for closure will generally not be supported where a building entitlement may result. Could we just have a comment on why you said generally?
Mr. Mooney?
Sorry, councillor, I'm just familiarising myself there with that particular clause.
The last paragraph on page 75, Mr. Mooney. Third dot point. Application for closure will generally not be supported.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it allows a level of discretion, councillor. Simple as that.
Okay.
Right. I mean, of course, in other states, there's pending legislation.
Yeah, being very
Who
mindful
cares?
of discretion, it would still be formally reported back to council for final approval. It would still come to council for final approval.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turlin?
Yeah, I suppose the same question in relation to regenerate. But the issue on the page 77, it says valuation methods. If there's going to be any restrictions on these titles, as per on page 75, or could be, the value of the land would be reduced, because if you can't use it for the purpose that anybody else could buy it, they bought it off a neighbour, therefore the value can't be the same. And also, if there's any 88B or E or any covenants on the site, that also needs to be taken into account on the valuation. So you can't ask somebody to pay for the top dollar and then at the next instance, generally, very loose word, then put covenants on it that are not upfront. So there needs to be some strengthening in the valuation method on any covenants that might be, or easements that might be added to it at a later date. Otherwise, it's not fair.
Well, I might make a comment. The valuation methodology reflects the use of the land. So if there are any restrictions or covenants or whatever else that are placed on the land, then the valuer takes that into account.
Okay, that I think Councillor Turlin was making more of a comment. So we have a recommendation as moved by Councillor Nelson and McLaughlin. I'll put the recommendation. All in favour, please raise your card. Okay, it is carried unanimously. We move to request 6.5 for interest-free loan for the Barrel Bowling Club. It's fairly self-explanatory, councillors.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
I'll move.
Moved Councillor Scandrett, seconded Councillor McLaughlin.
Just a point of order there, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, no, well, what's the point of order?
Sorry, look, whether I have a non-pecuniary interest, but Councillor Gordon Lewis, he was the president of the Barrel Bowling Club, but I don't believe he holds any executive positions.
Yes, you do not have any pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest.
Well, that's okay. I just wanted to seek that clarification. I'm happy to support it, but just noting that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Mooney has just pointed out to Councillor myself, I would assume, Councillor Scandrett, that you are going to page 80 as a suitable source of funds to be identified to fund it, or option 1? Okay, you go to option 1 on page...
Option 1 is option 1 is the answer, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so it'll be provide bowling club, bank guarantee, blah, blah, blah. To be funded, but it has to be determined where it would come from. So I would assume it will be the property development reserve. So that be included as part of option 1, Councillor Scandrett. So option 1, with the funding source to be identified from the property development reserve. Can you hear me, Councillor Scandrett?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can hear you, and that's fine. I'd like to briefly speak to it.
So we'll get that worded up, Councillor Turlin.
I'd like to briefly speak to it, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, well, councillor Turlin, do you have a question?
Yeah, with the LED lights and the solar panel, I understand the federal government has rebates for different community groups to apply for energy efficient lighting and solar panels. We're only talking $30,000. Has that been investigated, or can council provide the information for the installation of the lights, at least as we did in the council chambers?
Thank you. Has council investigated any funding sources that the bowling club might be eligible for?
With great respect, Mr Mayor, that's not for council to tell the bowling club how to do their business. They've made inquiries, I don't know. They've come to council and asked for council's assistance for putting that in front of council.
Okay, so the answer is we don't know, and it's up to the applicant. Councillor Halstead?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just want to be sure that this sits pretty well with or aligns with previous cases of loans to clubs, etc. I'm quite happy with the recommendation. Seems pretty sound to me, but I just wanted someone to maybe comment, someone from the staff there comment, for example, how it stacks against others of a similar nature.
Is there any comment? Yes, Mr. Paul.
Through you, Mr Mayor, to answer Councillor Halstead's inquiry. Yes, we have provided loans of a similar nature in the past. Welby Hockey, Barrel Golf Club, the Bundanon Club,
Mosfet Tennis Club.
Mosfet Tennis Club. There's been quite a number of them over the years. They all seem to happen in an election year, but that might be just coincidence.
Councillor Halstead?
Yeah, just to further add to that, I'm aware of those cases, and thanks for the reminder of those. That's good. I just wanted, that confirmation that what's being proposed here is not different to any of those.
No, Councillor Halstead. There have been in the past, and I'm trying to think of the one that's not coming to mind now, where there was interest payments, but they were waived based on a certain, the Barrel Golf Club was the example. Provided they met their repayment schedules, they didn't pay interest. If they didn't meet their repayment schedules, interest was going to be charged. That's the only one where I think there's a slight variation, but they met all their payments and they didn't pay interest.
Thank you.
Okay, any councillor Scandron, I think, wants to speak to his motion. Councillor Turlin?
Yeah, Mr Mooney, may I ask a question? Commonwealth Bank is at 2.2%, I think, on the previous loan borrowings. If I'm correct, an interest rate of $30,000 is $55 a month. It's $660 a year. That is the interest payment due to a bank at 2.2%. Is that how I understand it?
Well, if you've worked it out, we'd have to say probably.
No, anyway, the issue is this. They already have the availability of $100,000 credit line from the bank. And really what we're saying is they just don't want to pay interest to the bank. Would it not be better that they borrow the money from the bank and we pay the interest of $55 a month out of our councillors' contingency fund?
Oh, I think
Would that not be better?
That would start setting precedents.
It's not setting a precedent. We're just paying a contribution out of our contingency fund of just the interest payment that they are making. That's all it is.
Okay, I'll ask as the last question, then it'll be part of the debate. Councillor, Mr. Paul.
Look, it's a matter for council. I don't know the ins and outs of the financial arrangements the bowling club has with its bank, whether it has a line of credit or an overdraft, I don't know. Councillor Turlin is suggesting that we fund whatever interest payments there might be. Look, council could do that. It's a little odd, but if council wanted to go down that path, I suppose you could. You wouldn't fund it as a monthly interest payment. You'd give them a grant of whatever it is, $660, if that's the number, and say, there it is. That's not what they've asked for. At the end of the day, it's a decision for council.
Well, may I just add to that, if I can? On page clearly 80, it says that they have, this the third paragraph down from the top. So if you could have a look at that, Mr. Paul, it clearly says they've got $100,000 of credit available. So it's only the interest payment they don't wish to pay. It's not a lot of money. I would think it'd be better if we keep that $30,000 for other community projects and just offset it out of the contingency fund of 660 or whatever the figure is. I think I'm correct.
Okay, that is now a debating point. We have a mover and seconder. If you don't agree with the recommendation, then I suggest that you look at moving an amendment. But at this stage, I'll ask Councillor Scandrick to speak to his motion.
I'll put an amendment up then after Councillor Scandrick.
Well, you can amend it. You can put up the amendment now, and I'll still allow Councillor Scandrick to speak. Do you have a seconder? And what would be your amendment?
The amendment is that council pays the interest payment through the contingency fund equal to the $30,000 request from the Barrel Bowling Club.
Do you have a seconder? I'll ask again, is there a seconder for Councillor Turner's amendment? And as there is not.
I'll second it for debate, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Scandrick, you have the right to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to say that we have supported the bowling club before, like many sporting organisations in this Shire, councillors. That support has translated into getting people off the couch and out the opening. And I think the bowling green was the matter we supported before the synthetic finish. So that's why I'm moving this. Any activity by not-for-profit organisations like this, I think, deserves our attention, particularly now that we've got people wanting to get back out post-COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrick. Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Turlock can speak to his amendment.
Yeah, look, if you look at page 80 again, it says that they're going to save $6,000 per annum on the 10.5 kilowatt system. So that's fantastic. They're going to make some money out of the savings of the just the cost of the savings of the power. If it would be, to me, it's a nil cost to the club if we meet the interest payment and that they use their $100,000 to meet their commitment in relation to the borrowing for the solar panels and the lights. As I said, there could also be an opportunity for the federal government funding to do the light changes to LEDs.
You muted yourself, Councillor Turlock.
Sorry, that was on me. Sorry, Councillor Turlock. There was some background noise coming from another councillor. I hit the wrong one.
Councillor Turlock, you're muted.
Still on mute.
No.
Sorry, Councillor.
All right, all good. So listen, we're not giving them the money. We're actually just taking the money out of contingency, allowing the $30,000 to stay in the property reserve to go to other projects through the Shire. It, to me, would be the better way of doing it. They've got $100,000 of unsecured line of credit. They've mentioned that on page 80. They get what they want, interest-free loan, but they borrow it from the bank. We meet the commitments of the $660 per year. And there's still the opportunity, as I said, for the lighting to be installed by the federal government through a different grant. We know that is the case. We all know that's the case. They can apply for it. They probably haven't known about it to date. But that's one thing they can research. I'm sure they're watching this at this point in time to find out. So all we're going to do is meet the interest bill for that term, 4 or 5 years. They borrow the money. The community still is a winner, and we get to spend that extra $30,000 somewhere else within the community at a later date. Property reserves. I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Councillor Turlock. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think if we were going to support the amendment, we really needed to defer this and go back to the club because they have asked for, and what Councillor Turlock's put up is quite reasonable. but we've got to look at what they asked for. I'm sure they could have asked the other way, but look, I think we've got to answer what's in front of us at the moment. We know this is the only club that's still viable in Bowral, and we've seen a lot of bowling clubs close down in Mittagong, Mosfet, right across the state, and we'd like to support this club. We've done it before, as Councillor Scandrett has suggested, with saving them a lot of money on, artificial playing surface. This is a good use of. We're only talking $30,000 in the scheme of things for council, which is not a huge amount of money, and it's the term is only 5 years. So, look, I'm happy to go with the recommendation, but if someone wants to move that we defer this and we take it back to the club to find out whether they're happy to go the other way, well, maybe that's the way it should happen. But look, I think we just move on with this at this stage. But a reasonable sort of approach. But I think we've got to deal with what we've been asked for, and the what's in front of us. The recommendation is here, so I'm happy to go with that. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, it's an interesting concept that Councillor Turlin has raised, and as Councillor McLaughlin said, the club have made the request. I noticed that the club actually met with Mr. Mooney and discussed the issue with him, so they're sort of in a position where they know what they want. I think the fact that it's sort of the 11th hour now, but Councillor Turlin's raised an issue that might be able to be pursued when a further request comes in. So I don't believe that paying the interest out of the contingency vote is what the contingency vote is for. So on this occasion, I'd say let's keep in mind Councillor Turlin's idea for future, but on this particular case, I think I'll stick with the motion at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turlin. You've already spoken.
Just want to add to the amendment, if I can, defer it until further discussions in relation to the amendment.
Okay, that the matter be deferred. And we go. Okay. So the matter be deferred, and that the matter be deferred until a future date.
Until a meeting has been arranged.
Until a meeting has been organised and discussed with the Bowral Bowling Club.
And if you wish to put in there that it comes back to full council after that meeting, that'll be fine.
That's for you, Mr. Mayor. That's without getting into
That
debate. That's what
doesn't,
we would have to do.
that is obligated, so it doesn't have to be put in there. All right, I'm going to put the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment.
Point of order, please.
Councillor Nelson.
Would that mean that the first part of the amendment is yes, that's deleted? Okay, I'm happy now. Yep. Thank you.
All right, I'll put the amendment.
Mr. Mayor, could I just ask a question? So what we're doing now is we're talking about an actual donation of money. What if the loan defaults? I mean, there's a slim chance of that, but what if the loan defaults? Does the community then lose that that investment?
Mr. Mooney.
If I could answer that, Councillor Whipper. If money is borrowed by council.
Excuse me, we'll get staff to respond.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, part of the loan conditions, which is consistent with previous loans that council has endorsed, is that we would require a form of security. In this case, we would require that security to be in the form of a bank guarantee.
But what I'm hearing is we're paying the interest. We're not giving we're not giving a loan. an interest-free loan. We're giving a donation, which is the equivalent of the the capital on that loan. My question is, it's a gift from community to the bowling club, actually. If it all goes belly up, and I'm not saying it will, but if we set a precedent, I think it's something we've got to think about in more detail. That's all.
Okay, look, I'm going to close the debate. Everybody's spoken. We are now going into questions.
Just a point of clarification, on page 80, it's clear that the club was going to give, the third paragraph, security over the $100,000 line of credit. But if they use that line of credit, we have no security.
Councillor Turland, you are entering in the debate again. The debate has finished unless Councillor Scanlon wants a right of reply. No. So I'll put the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment, please raise your card. Councillor Nelson, Halstead and Turland. Those against? Which it will... I'm against it, so that's 4 to 3. Yeah, Whipper, Andrews and McLaughlin. I declare the amendment lost.
Councillor Scandrick.
And Councillor Scandrick, sorry. So I declare the amendment lost. We now... All in favour of the motion, please raise your card. And that is carried unanimously. We now move to the last business item, and that is still more money, $470,000 in relation to the loan for a construction of the clubhouse.
Could I ask for an introduction?
Yes, please. Mr. Mooney.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, report 6.6, final report of today's meeting, as the Mayor has mentioned. Purpose of the report is to seek Council's position regarding the request for a safety net funding agreement to the amount of $470,000 for a term of 10 years from the Southern Highlands Bridge Club to enable the club to construct its clubhouse and car park. Council, as you would be aware, that on the 24th of October, Council resolved to confirm its intention to enter into a 21-year lease with the Southern Highlands Bridge Club for the occupation of part of the David Wood playing fields, which would then enable them to construct a clubhouse. Feedback and comments and objections were received in relation to that proposed lease. In accordance with the Local Government Act, it was subsequently referred to the Minister for Local Government. Minister's consent for the 21-year lease was received by Council in October 2019. Councillors, over the past 12 months, club members have been working with council staff to determine the size and location of the clubhouse and the additional car parking the club is required to construct. And plans have now been drawn up for the clubhouse and the car park. Construction for the proposed new clubhouse and car park is estimated to be $690,000, and a breakup of the proposed funding of the construction costs is provided at the top of page 86. Council received a formal request from the Bridge Club to provide a safety net funding agreement to enable the club to commence construction. A copy of the letter is provided as attachment 1. If it is the direction of Council to provide a safety net funding agreement, then the recommendation from officers is that the loan or the safety net funding agreement be funded through the Property Development Reserve, which has a current uncommitted balance of $1.54 million. It's important to just make it very clear to councillors, this is not a loan agreement, and it's not something that we are recommended be formalised through a legal instrument such as a loan. The reason for that being because essentially the Bridge Club has no collateral, no security, which we can secure the debt against. A similar example to an agreement of this nature, which Council has endorsed and formally resolved in the past, is the agreement that currently exists between Council and the Wingecarribee Adult Daycare Centres. Despite that, despite the fact that there is no security, the club has still provided a 10-year forecast on how it believes it will be able to meet the repayments over the recommended 10 years, which is essentially what would form the basis of the funding agreement between council and the Bridge Club, should it be council's direction to support that application.
Thank you, and I'll ask Mr. Paul to make a comment and then questions. Councillor Turman's got a question, but Mr. Paul initially.
Look, councillors, just a little adjunct to what Mr. Mooney has said. This building will be owned by council and the community. So the Bridge Club will be funding it, and yes, council has agreed if this project goes ahead for the Bridge Club to have a 21-year lease. But ultimately, your security is the building belongs to council and the community. So whilst there is no formal collateral, if you like, provided by the Bridge Club as such, the building is an asset. The building will be owned by council. So it's a little unusual, but there are circumstances of this particular request.
Okay, councillor, I'm taking questions. So Councillor Turlin has a question, then Councillor Whipper and McLaughlin. Councillor Turlin.
So after what we've just been through with the $30,000 interest free, why could not the Bridge Club ask for an interest free loan on page 86? It's $50,000 over 21 years, which totals up to $690,000 originally. They have cash reserves in the bank of 165. So could the club ask for an interest-free loan, which we've just done for the bowling club, the Mosfet basketball stadium, and I think there was another one you mentioned, the adult daycare. Do they all pay interest? They're all interest-free.
Okay, Mr. Paul.
Councillor Turlin, just to reiterate what Mr. Mooney said, in the example of the Mosfet basketball, for example, we've got collateral. We've got a mortgage over 2 pieces of land down there. Yeah. So it's actually a loan agreement with collateral. This particular arrangement, council owns the land. The building will be owned by council. So the Bridge Club can't provide collateral because the assets belong to council anyway. So what they are asking for is an arrangement where they will agree to fund a community asset. And they're asking for council to give them the ability to fund that up front, and they will pay it off for their own use and purposes going forward. But ultimately, it's a community asset. In terms of the bowling club's a commercial entity. Council doesn't own the asset and won't own the asset. It's a different arrangement. So this is a very unique set of circumstances.
Councillor Whipper.
So just on that point, Mr. Mayor, the club have got no collateral. It is council property. We've got the indication that they'll pay for the facility. The reality is that they may not, and we'll be left with a facility that we may not have ordinarily funded or wanted in that area. I mean, it'll be for the sole use of the Bridge Club, I imagine. It is a bit of a different approach, and I'm just wondering why they didn't approach us to build a building, a purpose-fit building for their sole use. That's basically what we're potentially talking about, councillors.
You have raised a question that I'm going to ask Councillor Whipper. Councillor McLaughlin.
What do you want to answer to the question?
Yeah, well, that's sort of
Mine was along the same lines, Mr. Mayor, with regard to community access, and would it be solely for the Bridge Club?
Councillor Whipper, do you have a question out of that, or was that just sort of a...
Yeah, well, it's a statement, it's an observation, Mr. Mayor, but the question would be, is it worth the risk? That's the question I pose to the councillors.
Right, thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
Oh, look, just in the 10 years that we lease it to them, obviously they're putting up money, so I imagine they would have, the exclusive use. Would that be correct? Or would they have the opportunity to use it for other community groups when they're not playing cards?
Okay, it is a lease to the Bridge Club. So you're right, yes, it is for the Bridge Club users, and it would be up to them if
to sublease it. Okay, yeah.
Use it.
Yeah, I see. Thank you.
Okay, well, do we have a recommendation before us? Councillor Scandrick? Councillor Nelson, I'm waiting, looking for a recommendation.
Yeah, I'm happy to move it.
Okay.
Option one.
Option one.
Option one. Do you have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second it for debate. I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Nelson.
Happy to lead the debate, Mr. Mayor. The Bridge Club came to council with a business plan, and this is now the position where we're at following that business plan. The club's been looking for land for over 15 years. I know that because in my previous position with council, I endeavoured to find land for them throughout the Shire without success. Where they operate from now is East Bowral Community Centre. Now, they have to put their tables out and store them back each time they use it there, limiting their access. When they move into this new building, that will free up the East Bowral Community Centre for other uses, not to mention the parking in that area. The club will be able to attract regional competitions, which will, put them on a more formidable footing than just being local competitors. They do have a business plan. The building must be for sole use because they set their tables up and leave them out all the time. So I believe it is worth the risk to take on this loan. It's the culmination of the discussions that we've had with the Bridge Club, and it's the only way that we can move forward. It will be a great asset for the community and for the region and for tourism. So I fully support option one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Turland?
And Scandrick.
Councillor Scandrick, I think, was first, then Councillor Turland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know what happened to my internet connection, but I moved the motion. I don't know, it just froze. But I want to speak to... honestly, I wish councillors would have the maturity not to interrupt.
He wants to move everything.
Anyway, my point is here, I wanted to support this. I've been a long time supporter of the Bridge Club. The fact that it represents a whole lot of people, mostly in one sector of the community age-wise, but also councillors, post-COVID, there will be tourism opportunities arising from this support. I've always argued this because the regional competitions will be able to be held here in this facility, where, as Councillor Nelson's pointed out, the setup will be able to be left in place. So you will be seeing some hundreds of people visiting the Shire for these regional comps. I think it's a very good outcome. I support it.
Thank you, Councillor Scandrick. Councillor Turland?
Yeah, point of clarification, is there an interest payment in this, or is it just a repayment of the 470 borrowed?
No interest.
So no interest. And is the budget is going to be built by council? So is that right?
No.
It's going to be built by...
Get it clarified so everybody knows. Mr. Paul.
My understanding is it'll be via an ATCAL process.
Sorry, I missed that.
It'll be via an ATCAL process.
What does that mean?
Well, it's basically where council gives approval to third parties to do works or build assets on council land.
So council won't be project managing it?
No.
On council land, we have no control of what's being built?
Yeah, we do.
Well, we do. We have an ATCAL process that actually controls how that happens, but we won't be project delivering it, no.
They will have to pass all building requirements for certification prior to occupation under council's inspection criteria.
Yeah, I understand that, but the question is this, is that if we're not controlling it like we did the rugby club.
Well, look, Councillor Turlin, we are in debate. We are in debate. If you have clarification, and it's been clarified, but we are in debate. So you are speaking for or against the recommendation?
I'll speak against it at this point in time because I'm concerned that we are going to lose control of this. We are not project managing, we've just been told. We're going to give $470,000 of public money out of the property reserve, and then we're going to let somebody else project manager to control it. Now, I'm not saying they can't do it, but I think council needs to have some skin in the game to protect public money. I think it's a worthwhile project, but I think we could get ourselves in a situation where it could cost more money than what is so-called estimate of $690,000. They're already borrowing $50,000 off the Bridge Club Federation. They've got 165 of their own money, and they make 80 grand a year and paying us back $40,000 to $50,000 a year all the way over the period to 2031. Now, I think they're a great group, don't get me wrong, and I'm sure they can meet the requirements, but I think, council, if you're putting public money up from the property reserve, we need to make sure that we are protecting public money. And in this statement, this document in front of us, we are not protecting public money at all. They should get it, but it's got to be under a different regime, a different sort of contract where council controls the project management, the funding. Otherwise, what we've done, we've just let them go on their own path, and you know it's going to happen, just like the adult daycare. Oh, gee, we're a couple of $100 grand short now, and we need some more money. Where do you go then, councillors?
Thank you, Councillor Turlin. Is there any further debate? Then I'm going to put the recommendation, unless you want right a reply, Councillor Nelson.
Yes, thank you. Look, I think as opposed to the adult daycare building, where they weren't paying us back any money, at least the Bridge Club will be contributing the money back as detailed on page 86. So I'm sure that that we will get the building that we need, and if it does blow out, then their loan repayments will be extended. So I hear what Councillor Turlin's saying, but at this point in time, I'm going with the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. So I put the recommendation. All those in favour, please raise your card. Councillor Nelson, McLaughlin, Scandrett and Gare. Those against? Councillors Whipper, Halstead and Turlin. Well, that's three.
Councillor Halstead abstained, Mr. Mayor.
I think.
I'm going to put the again. Please hold up your cards in favour. Councillor Scandrett, McLaughlin, Nelson and Gare. That's 4 votes. Those against, Councillors Whipper and Turland and Andrews, and Councillor Halstead is abstaining. That is in the negative. I declare it a tied vote. I will use my casting vote to support the project in the affirmative. So I now put the motion. I declare the amendment carried. And I put the motion. All in favour of the motion, please raise your card. We've been there. It's the same.
It's been there, finished it.
It's carried.
Yeah.
It's carried on the vote of the mayor using the
Correct.
card.
Thank
And
God.
just out of interest, there's 29 other councillors in the state who have equal amount of councillors, and the mayor uses the casting vote.
Not as much as you do.